Hi everyone. Today we're going to look at how to set up and process petty cash on Moneypenny. We will look at the crew member facing portal to view what crew members see, and we will also look at Midas itself. We will also look at our online petty cash and how it works. Firstly, you should check the project settings to make sure all fields regarding the company and project have been input. You can do this by going to the Setup menu, then Project Setup, and you can choose to upload a logo in the Logo tab if required. If you upload a logo, you may need to scale the image, but you can right-click to see more options. Next, we should check to make sure that the custodian accounts have been set up. To do this, we go to the Currency menu in the Setup menu, double-click on the currency you need to check or modify. Add or modify the custodian accounts as necessary for each currency that is on your project that will handle petty cash. We can query the system to find what is available or open the chart of accounts to create a new code. More on this later. Next, let's add an email address to send notification via email when a float request is submitted and also when a petty cash reimbursement is submitted. To add this, we go to Setup, Email Setup, and then the Email Alerts tab. We can use the same email address in both, or we can have different email addresses if needed. We will be using the Moneypenny dashboard as display to monitor and process petty cash requests. For crew members and workers who would submit or require petty cash, we will need to have a creditor master file for each person. To create a new master file, you can do so in Accounts Payable and in Creditors Master File, or via Petty Cash and Creditors Master File. As you can see here, we have some fields to store GL account numbers for both petty cash and debit cards. You can choose to save the card number in the DB card number field. Please note, this is only for keeping a record of the card number itself. You should ensure that you update the bank details for those who require bank or BACS payments. But we will look at this in some more detail later on. For projects using locations, it's important to ensure that you add the locations and sets in here on the record, or you may encounter some problems later on. At the top of the screen, we see we have a Petty Cash Approvals tab. Here is where we can add an approval chain for petty cash. To add an approver, click Add, or to remove an approver, you can right-click to delete. For example, as shown, this crew member, Ronald Jackson, requires 2 approvers to approve petty cash. But this can be bypassed, and we will look at this in more detail shortly. We need to enter a PC or DBGL number for our crew member. If you are unsure, we can reference the chart of accounts to use an existing float account by highlighting and selecting it or creating a new one. To create a new flow code in the chart of accounts, we choose the COA button at the bottom of our screen. We scroll to the relevant area on the chart of accounts where the floats are, and we can use an existing float. If you want to rename an existing account, you can double click and change the name, or create a new sub-account using the next available account number. Be sure to place the code in the correct subsection. When we have set up the crew record, we can choose OK to save. Any project that has requested to use Moneypenny's online digital petty cash services, the crew members on that project will have access to the online petty cash option on the portal, which will also include the ability to request a float, submit petty cash for reimbursement, and lastly, there will be an option for those managers who need to approve petty cash. To request a float, a crew member chooses Float Request. The first time the crew member uses this option, they will need to supply a signature. They can do this on the portal using their mouse or touchscreen or any smart device they happen to be using. They need to enter the amount and currency and their preferred method to receive funds. These three options of cash, bank, and debit card can be changed at the project level by Moneypenny support. If you do not want to use one of these options, we can remove that option. If this is the case, please contact our support team. If the crew member selects bank, they are asked to provide their bank details into which the funds need to be sent. The crew member must accept some terms and conditions and then must click submit. The crew member can go back and view past requests in the My Documents tab should they need to. To submit petty cash, the crew member selects the Submit button. Here they will need to download the petty cash template to provide details of their petty cash spend. This template can be somewhat customized like your logo or project name and address, but certain fields will be required to import the data in Midas. If you want to customize, you will need to contact our support team. When the crew member has completed the petty cash template spreadsheet, they must upload it. They then will need to provide backup receipts and documentation. Please note we only accept one PDF, so this will need to be one merged PDF file. There are numerous free apps and websites that can combine receipts and documents into one PDF, and you can find the names of two such websites on our support article covering online digital petty cash. The crew member submits their request, and once again, they have the opportunity to view previous requests in the My Documents option. Once submitted, the accounts team will need to process the request. If there is an email address added, an email alert should be received advising a request has been made. Depending on the project setup and regional differences, the float request will be found in either one of the three in trays. It will either be in the AP folder, the PC folder, or lastly, the DB folder. For clients that want to use the AP module to process petty cash, Moneypenny support can redirect the document to go into the AP folder. Some people process petty cash in AP and some in the petty cash module. We will look at how they can do both today. The accounts team using Midas will find the request in their nominated scans folder, and also you may notice the dashboard indicates that there is a document in the folder for processing. Please note that you will not be able to open any Excel files on Moneypenny. You will need to copy this to your local machine, open and make the edits that are required for the import of your petty cash. There are two main ways to process float requests, one via accounts payable, the other via petty cash. Remember, if the submitted documents are in the AP folder, you are going to use the AP module. If it's in the PC folder, we are going to use the PC module. To do so via AP, we will go to the AP menu, then enter AP, and use the digital in-tray option and say it is unpaid. Key in the relevant information, select the appropriate code, add notes if needed, such as the provided reason for a float, save the transaction, and now for those projects using the digital accounts payable option, you will need to submit the transaction for approval as set up for your project using the Send to Selected Approvers option. Remember, only one notification is sent to those who approve invoices entered via AP, and that's roughly at around 8 a.m. local time. If the request is urgent, once it's been input and sent for approval, we can right click and use the reminder email. This, in effect, would send an email directly to an approver with the details for them to review and approve. For now, I will concentrate on the entry via the Moneypenny Petty Cash module. To do so via Petty Cash, we select Petty Cash, enter Petty Cash, and say yes to the in-tray. The PC and DB option here is what is linked to the PC and DB account numbers that are stored on the creditor master file, so it's important to ensure that they are stored on their record. For petty cash floats projects that using debit cards, we do not need to worry about the envelope amount. Cash amount is the total of any coins and notes supplied to the crew member, and the invoice amount is the total that is being paid via BACS or bank payment. You can also choose to enter notes in the notes box, perhaps including the reason for the float. For debit card floats, we do not need to worry about the envelope amount. The reimbursement amount is the total that will be loaded back onto the debit card. And again, we have the invoice amount, which is the total that is being paid via bank or BACS payment. For clients using the Pay to Cash module for the first time, it may be better to process any payments for crew via bank or BACS as separate transactions until you're more comfortable with the system. You can also choose to enter notes in the notes box, perhaps again including the reason for the float. Once our transaction is balanced and the amount to balance is zero, we can click to save the transaction. We can proceed to run an audit report in the Pay to Cash audit report menu, which will allow us to check the coding. And if you need to modify any unposted petty cash, you can do so in the petty cash unposted petty cash menu by double clicking on the transaction and making any necessary changes, or you can delete the transaction in full. For reimbursements, you can choose to enter the details manually, or you can use the import function where you import information copied from an Excel spreadsheet. When you use this import function, you will need to have the Excel sheet the crew member has supplied. You will only need to copy the certain fields that you want to import into the transaction. You go to Petty Cash and choose to enter Petty Cash. You then choose to import this as either a Petty Cash or a debit card transaction. Remember again, whichever option you use will look at the float or the GL account numbers that are stored in the creditor master file. The Excel template and the receipts and documentation that are uploaded by the crew member will be found in the Import PC folder. You will need to move the Excel sheet to your local machine to open to review, and you must also delete the Excel sheet from the in-tray folder on Moneypenny. Select the data you need to import, and in Midas, you choose to paste from Excel, and the system will insert the data from Excel into the transaction, and at the same time attach the receipts and documentation to the transaction. When we have saved our transaction and need to get approval, we select the transaction and choose either Submit to PC Approvers or Submit to Selected Approvers. The PC Approvers will follow the set list of approvers saved on a creditor master file. You can choose to not use the Pay to Cash approvers on a creditor master file and instead opt to use the Selected Approvers option, which allows you to pick and choose who is required to approve the Pay to Cash request. Pay to Cash approvers receive one email a day that will alert them that there's Pay to Cash that they need to approve. This email is issued at around 8 a.m. local time. But if your request is urgent, once you've entered the transaction and issued the approval request, you can right click and choose the reminder option. This will issue a notification that the request is urgent by email to the person who needs to approve the Pay to Cash request, and they will have a link in their email as shown, which they can click to approve the request. Or they can log onto the portal and go to Pay to Cash, approve Pay to Cash. They can choose to approve in bulk if needed by selecting Toggle All and then clicking the Approve Selected button, or review each request one by one. They would see information including the total of any receipts, the requested refund amount, and finally the float account balance. If they choose to view more detail, they will also be able to view any documents that have been added to the transaction, including any receipts. The approver, as you can see, cannot amend anything on the request. They can only approve or decline the request. If the request is declined, it will issue an email to the nominated account's email address and the status will change in Moneypenny to declined. To see the declined reason in Moneypenny, go to Pay to Cash, Unposted Pay to Cash, and right click on the transaction to view the reason. As you can see, there is an exclamation symbol, which is an indicator that there are notes. If required, you can edit that transaction, including either deleting the transaction as a whole, or you can modify the transaction and resend for approval. Once approved, you can post down your transaction. For any crew that have requested payment via bank, the transaction will now be handed over to unposted accounts payable, where you can post down the transaction again and include the payment in any payment run. Remember to check the bank details are those on the request form by opening the creditor record by using the creditor button and checking and changing the bank details if required. All documents including signatures connected to a petty cash transaction can be viewed using the Find option. Go to Petty Cash, find PC transaction, use the filter options as necessary. Double click on the transaction required and go to the Attachments tab. Here you'll be able to see all documents connected to the Petty Cash request. For more information on Petty Cash, please check out our support page at manual.moneypenny-group.com and here you can find further support articles.